So, K-Rahn, welcome to the Black Raww Podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, bro. So no, thank you for coming. And yeah, when someone from your team reached out to me, I was like, God, this would be someone dope to have on the podcast. So I'm glad to have you here. Are you a Lakers fan? Just noticing the Lakers hat.
I am. I mean, I'm more of a coordination fan, so if it matched, I'll wear it. But yeah, I am a Lakers fan for sure.
So that's fine. At least you said coordination. So like, if they're not doing well, which they're not doing the best right now, you can be like, nah, this is a different team.
Yeah, that's like the colors. Yeah, no. But I am a Lakers fan for sure. That's for sure.
So I would just love to sort of just delve in a little bit about yourself and sort of know, for me and for my audience, just to understand a bit about your personal journey, sort of where you've come from, and where you're going as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, depends on where you want to go with it, but I grew up, basically, like I have a book called Beyond the Crack Generation. And the whole point of that is just really talking about how hip hop affected my life and affected the culture in the world around me and things of that nature. So what I do now is I do a lot of work with incarcerated youth. I work with the reentry population, meaning those who are coming home from prison, helping them transition into the workforce, things of that nature, focus on life skills and trauma-informed approaches to community engagement and things like that. And I'm down to get into it, how, my process. But yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell.
Yeah. So quite a lot of quite a lot of interesting work, and I'm happy to sort of hear sort of the work that you are doing, because I think some of those communities, some of those men that have been incarcerated or that are going through youth justice, I feel like they're often forgot about, and it's like, oh, you committed a crime, forget, put you away, yeah. Let's not think about you and stuff like that. And you mentioned in terms of growing up in the crack era and sort of the hip hop influence of that. So like, can you take me back, in terms of what was that like? Like, you had the crack epidemic happening, you had hip hop and the culture just sort of fusing in with Black culture at that time. What was that like?
Yeah. So again, going back to the whole point, why it's called Beyond the Crack Generation. I was born in the 80s. And why that's so important is because this is around the time where crack epidemic is really hitting. And it's also the time where hip hop is starting to really take off. So what during this time, there was a lot of stuff going on. But as a little kid, I don't know. I see what I see, but it's before this time period to compare it to. So during this time, hip hop was giving me context to what was going on in this world, right? It's one thing to see guys hanging out in front of apartment buildings, right? And see the neighbor, let's call him the neighborhood beggar. Because as a little kid, I don't know what's going on. So the dusty guy, the neighborhood beggar, somehow just walks up to this group of young men and they exchange something and they get on. I don't know what's going on. But then when I listen to NWA Dope Man, it's like, oh, now I have some context, right? So what hip hop did was give me context to a lot of the stuff that was going on around me. And it did the same thing for a lot of our peer groups, right? It also gave us some principles to stand by, like X-Clan or Cam. I used to listen to Cam and X-Clan and even Cube. They taught me about the importance of upliftment. But then I also learned that life may be, is about sex and drugs and money and you know what I mean? So it was just this whole kid, and I think many of us during that time was experiencing the same thing.
Yeah. I think hip hop has sort of always had has always sort of had that reflection of what the culture is at the time, isn't it? And I think it is quite interesting in terms of, seeing it as a little kid and being like, what is that? And then NWA sort of talks about it and you're like, oh, that brings up a bit more of an awareness of it. And as you're saying, you're growing up as a child. Did your parents like, what did your parents sort of do in terms of, did they have conversations with you about it? Because I imagine they were super aware of what's going on in the street and then what kids are listening to as well. Was there sort of like an alternative message, like in your home?
Um, yeah, but not necessarily specifically addressing what was going on. So like I grew up with my mom. My mom raised me, and my mom always raised me that I'm going to be great. Like she always made me feel special and that I'm going to be great and, all of these type of things. So
Yeah,
as
that's what
far
moms
as
are
working
for.
on, yeah, she did her job with that. Had me really believing I'm great. You know what I'm saying? So in regards to that self-identity piece, absolutely. She was there to combat a lot of that. In regards to the social dynamic, not at all. My mom, she didn't have much artillery to address that. She didn't know. She just stay at school and do that type of thing like a lot of parents do. Because it was still, even though it was going on, if you was involved, you didn't know. Now in hindsight, we could look back and analyze the culture and analyze everything going on. But during the time, in real time, sometimes it's hard to address it like that. She just stay away from them. Don't hang out with the bad crowd. She try to pick my friends. She do stuff like that. But that's just their mom. She did a great job.
Definitely. It's sort of those, like, just those fundamental things of, make sure you're being good, make sure you're hanging out with the right people. And, you don't always get to, like, as you're saying, yeah, we can look back and be like, oh, so this happened and that happened. But really, you're just trying to do the best you can in the moment you've got it. And you don't always have time to think of the wider things. You're just like, well, listen, I got to make sure my kid is good. I got to make sure he feels confident in himself and is hanging out with the right people and being in the right places. So it sounds like she's done a great job, and I will talk more. We'll talk more about sort of what you're doing in the community. But yeah, I'm sure it looks like she's done a great job, definitely. So you mentioned about your book, Beyond the Crack Generation. And I just wanted to sort of understand a bit more about that in terms of what were sort of the key themes that you're looking at. What were some of the messages in terms of, when people read this, do you want to portray to them?
Yeah, well, the message is I take a autobiographical approach where I share some light on my journey as a kid during this time. And what I really focus on is how this crack epidemic, this time period, how it would affect the culture, right? How it affected the culture of the people that were affected by it, and the role that trauma plays in creating this culture in ways that we can address it. Like, for instance, I'll give an example. Like, one thing that's not really touched upon that is a huge piece of this time period and how it affected us is when we talk about the crack epidemic. Yeah, the dope game and all of that, the big time drugs and stuff like that. We see those in movies, right? But the piece that's so important is crack business was a kid's business. And I want to make sure that's clear. For those who remember during this time, yeah, you might see, like, if you watch an old movie like Scarface, yeah, you see the adults moving big kilos and all that type of stuff. But when you went to the hoods, you saw kids on the corner, what we call curb serving. It was the kids that was selling the little $20 rocks and things of that nature to crack, the crack addicts. Now, the interesting thing about that is even though the kids were the ones selling it, the adults were the ones who were smoking it. So what that did for many of us, whether we was directly involved in the dope game or not, it started to invert the generational rankings in our community, where now the kids start to have more power than the adults. Yeah. And I don't want to paint the picture like all the kids in the community were selling drugs, because it wasn't like that. It really wasn't like that. But those who were had a lot of influence on the community and on the culture as a whole. So imagine a 14-year-old standing on a corner selling this product and having adults willing to do not almost, to be real, willing to do anything that this kid's imagination entertained, right? For this little piece of crack rock. And he has a whole pocket full of them. It just totally changed the psyche of this population. And then when you couple that with Like I just said, the narratives that's going on in the music, that's narrating this and making this doctrine and things of that nature. It started, and plus the trauma, it started to shift the cultural norms going on in many of our communities.
Yeah. And what would you say those cultural, like what specifically in the cultural norms was it shifting?
We, like, for instance, we understood in our community, particularly in Black communities, we understood the importance of hard work, long-term achievement, you know what I'm saying, things of that nature. Crack epidemic, made it fast. I can get money today. You know what I'm saying? Every kid has asked, especially a young boy, has asked their mom, why I got to go to school? And then the answer is always, you go to school so you can get a good education. Why do I need to get a good education? So you can get a good job. Why do I need to get a good job? So you can make money. Oh, mama, if that's the case, the homie just showed me how to make money today. I could skip all those years, right?
Yeah.
So then that becomes the psyche, the part of it. Okay, I can start making money today. Again, in real time, you don't know the future. You don't know, like, oh, shoot, they giving out, decades behind this, right? You don't know that as a kid, and you're willing to risk it. So it started to shift, first of all, that mindset of long-term achievement, the process of that, where now I can get it now. It also shifted the communal piece, because again, just giving that example again, I'm a kid. This man is an adult. Let's tell the story of this man. This man may have once been a pillar in the community. He may have once been the coach. He may have once been the guy that rounded up all the young boys together and gave out lunches. Now he's addicted to this crack rock, and he's a shell of who he was. So now I don't, as a kid, another value system, cultural norm is not to respect the elders. What can you tell me? Oh, man, I make more money than you. All of that type of nonsense that's going on. That stuff shifted. And I'll give you one more. I am my brother's keeper. I don't want to romanticize history like we always was so unified, but we always have had a sense of unity in our communities, Black men and women. And it just totally shattered that, where the community became so fragmented, where I got to get mine, you get yours, you figure it out. I'm just trying to survive, I got to get mine, that type of thing. So those are some of the examples of what it did. And it became a cultural norm where we started passing that down on to our children. And we just started operating in that way. And again, reinforcing it throughout the communities.
Yeah, that, like, I never even really sort of thought of it like that. And you sort of bringing it up, like you can sort of, you can understand then where, because these men would have been growing up, and, if they weren't incarcerated, or if they weren't killed, or, a lot of these norms and values would have then trickled down to their children. And I can really see how that sort of trickle down effect can even be impacting the children now, of this generation. So I think it is quite interesting to be able to see how what happened in the 80s with the crack epidemic can sort of still have ripple effects, and even all the potential leaders and potential men and pillars of community that were probably lost throughout that period in time. It's just a bit harrowing when you think about it, and it's a shame that it happened, and it sort of did happen. And I've been watching. I finished Snowfall ages ago, but that was a great show, and I didn't know, sort of, like, I understood about the CIA and them being shady and stuff, but I didn't really understand in terms of how that was then being put into the system. So that also then just breeds a mistrust of governments and further impacting these generations and these social norms. Because if you're thinking, why would I then rely on this government that, has peddled drugs into my community? Let me just make money for myself. Forget about everybody else. Forget about the government. I'll just do me and do my own. And you can really see how that can then shape future generations and future men as well.
No, and that's a huge point that you're making, because again, the word trauma is thrown around so much. Trauma. But one of the biggest symptoms of anybody who has experienced traumatic experiences is a high suspicion. Anybody that's been dealt with trauma has a high suspicion of everything or anything that resembles is trauma. So when you talk about what you just shared, you're right. That's another cultural norm. So first of all, let's rewind a little bit. Because the crack epidemic, the business was so cutthroat. And then again, this is also the time, the rise of street gangs. It starts to be now one of the cultural norms is resorting to violence, right? We resort to violence for every conflict. Okay, something must be wrong with you. And then when we start, so that's already going on. So now, because I know that you might be violent, I'm going to be violent, I have a high suspicion of everything. Like, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to respond, right? So now I'm suspicious of everybody in my community. Or not, I mean, not literally everybody, but you know what I'm saying? Majority of people in my community. And then on top of that, I'm also very suspicious because of our history with law enforcement, right? And then when I start to do my research and find out how the drugs came into my community, I am definitely suspicious of government, right? So it just becomes this social norm where I don't trust anything. Even if it's on a subconscious level, I don't trust anybody to have my best interests at heart, right? Because I know at any given moment, there can be somebody who may turn on me. And once that becomes a cultural norm, it's very hard for that people to thrive as a community.
Yeah, definitely. And so I wanted to pivot just a little bit, not even pivoting that much, but we're talking about the social norms that that people have gone through during these periods of time and just throughout, to be honest with you. And when you're working in youth justice settings or with people that have, come out of prison and things, what are you sort of seeing amongst, we'll talk about men because, it's a podcast about Black masculinity. But what are you sort of seeing in the men that are involved in crime that, have been in prison and coming out of prison? What are sort of the stereotypes, but even just what are you seeing from them? What are they saying to you?
Well, what I'll share with it, because everybody's different, but again, that common thread is keeping it real and then, that type of mentality. But the challenge with keeping it real is this concept of real has been manufactured. You see what I'm saying? A lot of the stuff that we consider real is actually detrimental to ourselves, right? And again, going back to what we shared earlier, one of the things is I'm willing, the stereotype of what masculinity is about and what a lot of these young brothers and older brothers have been taught is masculinity is about being willing to throw away everything in the name of my pride at any given moment. See what I'm saying? So when I'm keeping it real, I'm willing to throw away everything right now for the sake of my ego and my pride. And then I'm willing to do it again tomorrow and the day after, so it never ends. So even right now, when you look like with I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on with J. Cole and Kendrick.
I don't know why he didn't just release the diss track, but it's all right.
He released the diss track. Kendrick,
and then he took it back, didn't he?
He took it back, right? So as a hip hop head, it's like, wait a minute, I want to see that competition, right? There's a competitive nature in hip hop. Go for it, Yeah. But then again, when you look at the bigger picture, this is something I've never seen in hip hop or even in our culture. Black men do a public apology in the midst of a battle? Like, what? So in one sense, as a fan, it's like, no, come on, man, what you doing? But in another sense, it's like, wait a minute. Black man, wait, what? Talk about it don't sit right with his spirit. And even though the world is telling him, bro, you need to go do something. Bro, you need to go do something. You stand against the world for your inner peace and what's going on and say, you know what, black man, even if it means my own humiliation, I apologize. Never seen that before, right?
Nah, never.
Because, the way many of us are taught, you got to go for it, especially in the midst of it. It's too late. It's go time. Ain't no turning back. It's go time. You know what I mean? Win, lose, or draw, right or wrong. And, you see that a lot in our communities, even though that's, rap, but that's a cultural norm too. Ain't no apologies. We fight. Even if I figure out I'm wrong, I'm not admitting that. It's battle time, right? And that could be other communities as well, but that happens a lot in our communities. And I see that. And I see that conflict is addressed with violence. These are what we're taught. You can't look like no sucker in front of nobody. You know what I'm saying? You can't look like that. So that's been one of those things. And when and the challenge with that, when we start going back to the conversation, is a lot of our young men, a lot of our formerly incarcerated, it's very hard to transition from that. I'm willing to throw away my chance of long-term achievement for my immediate pride right now.
Yeah, that was, I was just laughing because I was literally just talking to my cousin about it as well, about J. Cole. And I had that same reaction as well. And I'm sure everyone did. Is like, yo, I want to hear this diss track. Yo, J. Cole coming at Kendrick. Like, okay, we've got a battle on our hands. Let's see. It's what happened, isn't it? Tupac, Biggie, like, I'm sure Drake's done diss tracks of other people as well. And like, it's definitely in the culture, but like, I didn't even think about it how you phrased it in terms of that. You know what? He said it didn't sit right with me. I apologize. And that is very rare. Like, especially for someone of J. Cole's status, because he easily could have been like, no, and we could have gone on and whatever. But he actually, I love that. I love that he was like, no, actually, it doesn't sit right with me. I didn't. There's no need to do it. Let me take it off. And yeah, because that's vulnerable. That's vulnerability right there from one of the biggest rap stars in the world.
Yeah, and I got conflicted responses to this whole thing. But one of the biggest things that I respect about it is basically, from at least what I'm hearing, he basically saying I didn't really feel slighted by what Kendrick said. Like I only went after him because the people around me gassed me up. You see what I'm saying? Now, it's different when I'm fighting because I have a conviction and I'm standing on something and I'm fighting. But if I'm doing it because everybody's gassing me up, now that's ego. Now I'm out there, you know what I mean? And he pumped the brakes on that. So because of that part of it, I'm like, wow, I've never seen that. You know what I mean? I got to respect that.
Yeah, definitely. And he's living up to the status of Black and Raw, man, because he's being vulnerable. He's being open and honest out there. And as you were saying, to the point in terms of that, these men that you're working with, these young boys that you're working with, they're ready to drop everything for the sake of their ego, for the sake of their pride. And it's a shame because you see the impacts of that, don't you? You see the long-term impacts that has on a person. If someone slighted you and, you resort to violence and then you've got 10 years in prison, you're missing out on loads of things and your life outcomes are going to be lessened, but it's all you've known and it's all you've seen. And especially when you've grown up in the culture and the environment, it's all you've listened to as well in rap music, in hip hop. And I don't ever want to be like, there's some people be like, oh, you shouldn't be listening to hip hop, all those, those hip hop artists. And you can only see the old heads or whoever's talking about it. But I think it's more the environment that you're in, because people could listen to hip hop and listen to rap music and be like, okay, that's what they're doing. That's their life. I can enjoy it. I can understand maybe what they're going through, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what I do and what I go through. But that takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of self-awareness. And it's not an easy trait. And I'm still working on my self-awareness and all of that. There's things which, like I've been going to the gym more often, and I always hear people saying ego lifting. And like, I can see myself sometimes doing it. If someone's like, oh, can you do this? Go on, try that. Or like, you like, I injured my back a few months ago. Maybe it was in December or January. But it was purely just because I was like, oh, let me just see how much I can do on this squat. Like, it should be easy. But I was playing to my ego, and then I got back pain for like 2 weeks. So, and that's minor compared to jail sentences or, being involved in crime and criminality. So you can easily see how your ego can like get the better of you. And I don't know. I think it's about trying to give them grace and trying to help them understand that you don't have to do that. And I'd love to know, in terms of about your curriculum and how you're working with these young people, how you address some of these things of culture, hip hop, masculinity, ego, and just empowering these young people.
Yeah. So the curriculum is called Live Above the Hype, life skills curriculum. And in that, we use hip hop as a common thread, hip hop culture. And one of the things that we talk about, first of all, is, hip hop culture. When I don't go this deep into it, but just to give you some point of reference, some context of where it's coming from, hip hop culture at one time directly represented the people who directly created it. See what I'm saying? Black communities, impoverished communities, even some brown communities, things of that nature. When we're talking about the root of it, especially on the East Coast, it was a voice that really represented the realities, the perspectives, the thoughts, and even the best interests of the people who created it. But then it got popular, and now what we have is a corporate hip hop culture. You see what I'm saying? Corporate hip hop culture is not the same as pure hip hop culture. Corporate hip hop culture is about popularity. So when we start talking about like masculinity and hip hop and all of these things, some of this stuff is manufactured. So it's a false sense of masculinity. And the masculinity is based on public acceptance. So at one time, I would stand up, in hip hop culture, I would stand up against certain powers that be or something like that, right? Because that's how I feel. That's what's going on in our communities. And that's in the best interest of my community to stand up against this. Now, corporate hip hop culture says, nah, I'm not standing up against too much of nothing because I don't want to mess up my corporate sponsorships, right? So I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to offend this group of people because I'm going to mess up my corporate sponsorships. But I don't mind offending this group of people because my corporate sponsorships are cool with that. So that's why, if you look, at least from my perspective, that's why it's okay in hip hop, quote unquote hip hop, to disrespect Black men and disrespect Black women and talk about killing them and doing whatever to them, but don't disrespect anybody over here, right? Because when we talk about popularity and pop culture, Black death has always been entertaining. If you look at the history in America, lynchings and things of that nature, Black men and Black women being hung. If you see old pictures, you see a lot of, some of them, you see a lot of people around there. It's like, think about it. You see a lot of people around there and you see the picture. So think about this. During that time period, there wasn't no camera phones where you could pull out a camera and take a picture. They literally had to bring a photographer, had to find a photographer. First of all, everybody ain't got no camera. They had to find a photographer, hire the photographer, wait till the photographer set up. Because remember, these was the big cameras that when the smoke come out and all of that, poof. They had to hire a photographer, wait for them to set the camera up, and then start the lynching, and then have all the people around. So just being real, Black death has always been entertaining. So in corporate hip hop culture, it's still entertaining to see violence in the Black community, but don't disrespect another community, right? So that's some of the stuff that I see when I talk about when we talk about live above the height, what we do is we dissect some of these things, these cultural norms, and we ask, like, being quote unquote real, does it lead to what you consider real? Does it lead to success and prosperity, or does it lead to failure and hardship? Now, if it leads to success and prosperity, stay with it. I'm not, because I don't tell anybody, especially young people, I don't tell them what to do. I can't tell them what's right or wrong because I'm not in their shoes and I'm not living where they live. But I do want to help them think. I can't tell them what to look at, but I can help them on how to look at it, right? And that's what I do with hip hop culture the same way.
It's like how they say, I can't even remember the quote, but it's like, teach someone how to catch or give someone a fish and they'll eat for a day. Teach someone how to catch a fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. It's sort of like that. Let these guys think for themselves and have that sort of awareness rather than just sort of preaching at them or giving them all the answers, because it won't help them in the long run. And when you're not there, like when they're by themselves and they're thinking about doing something, they may go back to those sessions that you've had with them and be like, is what I'm about to do going to lead me to success, or is it going to lead me to failure and misery? Probably the worst option. So, let me not do that. And I think it's brilliant in terms of trying to get those aspects out. In terms of, in relation to masculinity, how do you sort of see that show up within the people that you are working with?
Well, when it comes to masculinity, again, just keeping it consistent. One thing that's very important is, especially again, I can only speak as a young, well, as a Black man and think out my experience as a young Black boy. There was only one emotion that was socially acceptable, and that's anger. Not even happiness. You can't even smile too much. You smile too much, they're like, man, what you smiling at? Why are you so happy, right? You can't even be happy. The only thing that was socially acceptable was anger. So what happens is when I'm mad, excuse me, like let's say I'm sad. I can't say, hey, bro, you hurt my feelings. I'm sad. No, I gotta be angry. If I'm embarrassed, I'm angry. If I feel, anything, I gotta translate it as anger. So I suppress all my other feelings and only express anger. So as I get older, I start to not even recognize those other feelings, and I only translate everything as anger. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we have to unpack a lot of those things, and again, the people that know me, I'm not the most vulnerable persons, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of this stuff, I'm a client as well. I'm not the most, emotional person. I'm just not, you know what I'm saying? But I'm learning to acknowledge, like, hey, you're not really angry. Your feelings are hurt. You know what I'm saying? I gotta have these inner conversations. Now I'm not gonna necessarily go out. I'm not there yet. Where I'm about to, hey man, you hurt my feelings. I'm not there yet. But I'm just saying, at least when I have these processes, I'm not so quick to react. I can better respond. And that's what I help teach other people, like respond versus reacting. Because that 5-second decision, not even 5 minutes, that 5-second decision can change the next 20 years, the next 30 years, the rest of your life. 5-second decision, right? So just processing these things, again, these social norms and stuff like that, because we're taught to not think, react. You know what I'm saying? As long as your pride is intact, once it's all said and done, you made the right decision. They know how, you know what I mean? And no, that's not the case, So things like that is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And we're all a student, aren't we? We're all still learning. To be fair, I think for me, I was quite a calm person. But I think I probably suppressed my emotions more, maybe didn't express them as much. And I think that sort of probably has a little bit to do, like, in terms of growing up as an African child, you're sort of seen, not heard, you're not really encouraged to share your opinions and your voice and what you think on the world. But I definitely, sometimes I would shut down instead, Sometimes it's like, right, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to move away. Or even, I think we all sort of have those, I guess, coping mechanisms for maybe how we deal with sort of those difficult emotions or those difficult conversations, or, someone hurts your feelings and all you want to do is lash out, or all you want to do is give them the silent treatment, or just let them walk all over you. You know what I mean? I think we're all sort of learning and being on this journey. And I think sort of being able to share that with the young people that you're working with, and even you sort of being vulnerable with them, being like, yo, listen, I can get angry, guys. Like that I can have that quick 5-second snap, and something can happen which you're not necessarily proud of. And I think it is brilliant that you're able to share this with these young people, because they may never have heard these messages. They may never have heard guys just, instead of reacting, respond. Like, instead of just lashing out, your ego is not necessarily, is not being hurt right now. No one's trying to hurt your ego. Like, be able to recognize that and have a different response. And I think doing that work is brilliant and needed, because as we talked about before, kids were growing up in the crack era where, as well, we talk about trauma, we talk about the experiences they're going through. They're more like they were in a situation where it's either fight or flight. You have to react to sort of save your life. So that shows up in all aspects of your life. And then just because you get sent to prison, or just because something happens, doesn't mean your whole life perspective changes. I feel like either your life perspective can change, or everything just compounds itself even more. And then that's even a harder place to be.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And that's the whole point. It's true, because it just, if we don't have time to stop and think and reflect, we're just constantly reacting. So we never get ahead of the curve. We never get ahead of the ball, right? We're just constantly reacting to what's thrown at us. And we're not even fully processing a lot of times. We're not even fully understanding the context of what's going on. So like, that's another thing. So another piece of work that I do is I work on being trauma informed. And like I say, we hear the word trauma a lot, but what does it mean to be trauma informed, right? If I'm a teacher or I'm some kind of service provider, one of the first things I need to do is understand what trauma is and understand how trauma shifts the consciousness of a person. It shifts the psyche of a person. So I no longer see the world like I once seen it. The world, I feel vulnerable in the world, whether I acknowledge it or not, once I've experienced some trauma. And if I'm the service provider, I need to be able to at least consider that may be a part of why a person may be having problematic behavior. I'm not diagnosing anybody, but I'm at least considering it. So when this person, and I say good morning, this person is not friendly in the morning or is more standoffish, instead of me taking it personal, like, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with her? Maybe it's not about me. Maybe it's something else going on. And maybe I should approach it in a different manner, So it's very, very important for those who are working with our communities to understand that trauma is real and to understand that it takes a trauma-informed approach to start to heal some of these fragmented relationships in our community.
Yeah, definitely. You're talking to a social worker here, so I definitely know what you're on about when we're talking about trauma informed. And the thing is, like, and one reason why I sort of do love having that sort of trauma informed is because you're meeting people where they're at, rather than sort of coming in with a judgment or, it's like, oh, as you're saying, like, why are they reacting like that? Like, oh, what have I done? Or as you're saying, it's not about you. Like, it's about whatever's going on for that person. And especially like when I'm working as a social worker, there are people who have really negative views about social workers or have had negative experiences with social workers. And when I come in, I'm like, oh yeah, more fresh faced and more new, but they're thinking about that person that really disrespected them or that really criticized them and didn't praise them enough. And that's the trauma that they're going through. But it is just realizing where people are at in that moment. And that trauma shows itself up in many different ways, many different versions. And you're not able to just approach a situation and it's all fresh. That's just not how it works, is it?
Not at all. There's points of references, right? So like using you as an example, you could come in with the most purest intent and you say, I got into this work so I can help other people. But if I'm your client, if I'm on your caseload, and my last experience with social workers was horrible, that's what I see. I don't see you as the person. I see the social worker, and you represent that. And my brain is triggered by that. And that's how I'm responding or reacting to you until over time, gradually, you show me that you are not my past experience. You are different. Because if you tell me, I don't believe you. Matter of fact, I'm even more suspicious because now I think you're lying to me. You tell me you different. Oh, yeah, I really don't believe you now. Another ball went up, right? Yeah. Until you show me. And then over time, when you show me, that's when I was like, oh, okay, cool. Right. And that takes time. And sometimes it does not happen because sometimes those walls are so thick that we don't even have enough time to break down all these walls. And that's okay too, right? Because like you said, we meet people where they at and we're responsible for the process and not necessarily the outcome. So we just keep it pure as we can in this work that we do.
Definitely. What inspired you to sort of make this curriculum and really sort of go out to those communities and try and help those people? As I mentioned before, we often, people that are involved in crime or in criminality are often forgot about because it's like, you've committed a crime, forget about you. Whereas actually some of these people are the most vulnerable within our society and they do deserve our respect. They do deserve our attention and our best work. So yeah, what inspired you?
Well, one of the things that inspired me is going back to us sharing, like my mom's raised me to be what I feel is a good guy with good values, right? And even as a quote unquote good guy with good values, I still got caught up. See what I'm saying? I still fell into what we call the hype. That's why it's called live above the hype. I still found myself in certain situations where I could lose it all for the sake of some nonsense, you know what I mean? For the sake of being gassed up by the culture around me and all that type of stuff. And it's like I say, like we talked about earlier, you know what I'm saying? That is very intoxicating, where what you gonna do? Or this is how you're supposed to handle it. And next thing you know, I'm in a bad situation praying to God, please get me out of this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, that happened to me. And like I say, I perceive myself as a pretty good guy. So how many more other people is that happening to? And I wanted to start to help break that cycle. You know, I don't come here trying to save anybody or, you know what I'm saying, end violence in the community for good, because I don't think I'm that guy. But I do want to help people critically think, right? And I saw that a lot, especially when I went back, you know, after I got my education, I went back into the teacher and working with young people. I saw that the cycle was continuing. I'm like, oh, young man, you responding, you reacting just like I was taught to react, just like the homies was taught to react. How does this stop? And start to help these young people just critically think. Now, after you take the time and you critically think and all of this type of stuff, and you still feel it's worth it to make that decision, I mean, more power to you. You know what I'm saying? Do what you got to do, what you feel you got to do. But at least think. When the thought process is out of it, you're actually robbed of your free will. You know, we talk about we all have free will, but we only have free will if I'm conscious enough to think about what I'm doing. If I'm just reacting off of what I'm taught and I'm just reacting off of emotion, I didn't have free will in that. I was, you know what I'm saying? I didn't think about it until it was already done and the damage is done. So I want to help people with this process. Let's destroy this false sense of manhood that's saying that we have to destroy one another to be real and destroy one another to be, you know, a true man, you know what I'm saying? Or I have to be able to, whether it's destroy physically or I have to stun on you. Like, you know what I mean? Let's say I do make a lot of money. I can make a lot of money and do good and look good and just be that. I don't have to do good, look good and say, look what you ain't got. Look, you ain't got what you see, I'm still destroying one another. Like, let's break some of that stuff down, you know, just again. So to wrap that up, just looking at how I was taught and how I was socialized and how my peers were socialized, helping to break some of that cycle when it comes to the negative aspects of it.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And I love sort of you just, you know, you're able to get your education, you're able to see that, oh, the cycle's repeating itself. Like, I've got to do something about it, because some people could see the cycle repeating itself, but like, it's a lot of work for me. Right. You know, I'm going. So I'm really glad to be able to hear that you've been able to do that. And, you know, we talked about some of the strategies and techniques that you've used in terms of getting people to critically think and be able to just, you know, pause in that 5 seconds and just be able to respond rather than react. I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you use when you're working with young people, when you're working with ex-convicts and stuff that's helped them?
Yeah, well, one of the things, again, we talk about trauma-informed. One of the key principles to being trauma-informed is establishing emotional and physical safety. So one of the things, first thing I do is make it very clear that I am not judging. You know, a lot of times we say, oh, I don't judge, but we do, right? It's like, no, I'm really not judging, because most of the decisions that has been made, or the poor decisions have been made, has been a result of the way you've been socialized, right? So there's no judgment there. Once we can get past that, then we can start, you know, then the defenses are down, where you don't have to defend the decisions you made. I get it. I've been there. You know, it's one of those things. I get it. You know what I mean? And who's to say I wouldn't make the decision now, right? Like, I get where you're coming from. But let's unpack that. And then once we, you know, so again, it's a process, you know, then let's unpack that. Is that the wisest way to approach this situation? Is that the wisest cultural norm to continue to walk in? Is it, you know, is what you were taught, how you were taught to respond or react at 15 still valuable at 35, right? Should you still be responding the same way you responded at 17 years old, at 40, right? You know, just all of these type of things. And again, we unpack it and really process it. And we focus on outcomes. Like, my main thing is having goals. Like, a lot of times we use morals as the compass. Like, don't do this because this is right, or don't do this because this is wrong, or do this because it's right. But the thing about that is culture dictates morality, not morality itself. Whatever culture I'm in, those are going to, again, mold the social norms, and the social norms are going to decide what's morally right and what's morally wrong. So I can't come into a community saying what's right and what's wrong, right? Because it's all based on culture. But I can use your goal as a moral compass. If your goal is to take care of your daughter and make sure your daughter grows to be a thriving young lady and all of that, is it wise to do what you're about to do?
Yeah.
Right? That's the moral compass. If your goal is to make your moms happy and take care of your mom and do, be that upstanding citizen that you say you want to be, is this decision, is this lifestyle going to get you to that? And if it's not, then I'm not telling you to change overnight, because it's probably not that easy, but we need to start putting a play together so we can start figuring out a way so you can navigate through this and become that upstanding citizen that your goal, that you have set as your goal. So I use goals as the moral compass, not morality itself.
I like that because I have a lot of dinner conversations at the table with my family, and I think me and my sister have probably talked about like, does society determine morals, or and I think being able to get people to think a bit differently and be like, okay, actually, where do you want to be? Like, what does your goal, like, what person do you have to become for your goal to become a reality? And helping people shift that perspective and being like, okay, well, I've got to be a person that shows up for my daughter. And what does that showing up look like? It means going to school plays. It means, taking her to important appointments. It means being there. It means being present. What does being a model citizen? I want to be there for my mom. How do I support my mom? Well, that means you got to get a job. You got to be doing this. You got to be doing that. I think that really helps people sort of shape that perspective of actually, oh, what should I be doing, rather than, oh, society says that you should do this, so therefore this is how you should respond. Because also realistically, you said, culture determines what morality is. You can still have people within the culture, within the norm, that go against it and are still winning. You know what I mean? So then you probably look at them and be like, well, they're going against the morality. Like, look at all the billionaires, they didn't get their money ethically. They fair enough for them, being billionaires, but, it's not like they're the most moral, upright humans, yet they've been praised and given money and for just doing whatever they do. So it's also being able to realize that and just taking it for yourself and being like, this is who I want to become. What does that look like? How do I get there? And it gives people steps to get there as well, because it can always seem like a big, daunting task. But if you're able to, start slowly breaking that down and be like, this is my goal. This is how I'm going to take this step. This is how I'm going to take that step. Just sort of taking it each step at a time. And I think being able to help people that way, I think is a really good way, because you don't then get, oh, you should be good because I've said you're good. Like when you tell a child, oh, you should be good because I say so. And they're like, no. As adults, we're sort of the same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is it makes a big point, because, and I would share this, like in Live Above the Hype, we demystify success. Because what our society does, it dangles all the spoils of riches, all the cars, the jewelry, the lifestyle, but it doesn't show you how to quite get it. So it leaves you to your own imagination on how to get it, right? So if this opportunity is presented to me where I can start getting stuff quick, I'm gonna do it. That's like the crack epidemic. It was like magic beans for people. Oh, shoot, I can sprout, plant these seeds and have a magic beanstalk by tomorrow, overnight. Now obviously it was a false sense of success, because we found out later that it was very detrimental. But that's another thing that happens, where even like how you mentioned the billionaires and stuff. It's like, I hear that there's billionaires, but I really don't know what they did, So then it leads me to my imagination. It's like, wait, did they do it morally, ethically? Did they not? I don't know. I don't know what they did. Like, I don't know. So, you know what I'm saying? So we also unpack some of that about, like, we talk about like the 4 types of money makers. Either you're going to be an employee, which sells your time and skills. You're going to be a self-employed, which owns a job, right? You're going to be a business owner, which owns a system, even though self-employed and business owner kind of go hand in hand. They're not quite the same. Or you're going to be an investor, a person who sells money. Like, I've never heard that as a kid. I wish somebody at least broke that down to me. You know, it's just like breaking these simple things down. Those are the simple 4 ways to make money in society. I never knew that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then we can unpack, what does that mean for you? Which one feels best for you? Because none of them are better than the other, depending on how you're wired. Everybody's not wired to be an entrepreneur. I know we're in a time where that's what we're preaching. Everybody's not willing to be that. Like, it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur. I know, right? Like, it takes a lot. If you only eat what you hunt, that's it. If you don't hunt, you don't eat. Unless you got that drive to go out there and get it every day, then you might not want to be an entrepreneur. You might want to be an employee. And that's okay too. And you can use your being an employee, build your skill set so you can make more money, and then use that money and be an investor. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And sell your money. Like, you know, so it's like breaking that stuff down. What fits for you, you know? Because if I'm just going by what's popular on social media, I'm going to think it's entrepreneurship. I'm going to fail at being an entrepreneur. Then I'm going to think something's wrong with me. And then I'm going to, you know, and then I'm looking for quick schemes and all of that, you know. So it's just unpacking a lot of this stuff that's thrown at us with no context.
Yeah. And taking it back to J. Cole, everyone was telling him about the hype and what he should do, and, you know, and he was like, this didn't sit right with me, because he knows himself, and he was also like, no, that's not me. That's not what works for me. So figuring out what works for you in terms of making money, in terms of, you know, because you're right. The whole culture and social media is like, oh, you know, you gotta have your own business. You gotta be able to work remote, or, you know, you gotta be able to like take 2 weeks off and it's okay. And, you know, I've seen my dad be an entrepreneur, and there's times where he's had to be out until ridiculous o'clock, or he's not home for a day or two, or he's super stressing and he can't sleep. And that's not for everybody. Like, right now I'm an employee and I love it, because I can just, you know, choose. I can be like, okay, I go in 9 to 5, clock off, get my money. It's cool. I don't have to stress about it. I just have to turn up and do my job.
It's every 2 weeks that money is there, right? The benefits, all of that. Exactly. And that's important that, you know, again, that's important for people to know. Like, you know, again, you know what I'm saying? Don't go by what popular opinion is, because popular opinion is usually influenced by whoever is the most influential. And the most influential is usually molding popular opinion for their own agenda, whatever that is. You know what I'm saying? So let's unpack that and let it be known that it's okay to be authentically yourself. And that's what Live Above the Hype is about. It's okay to be authentically yourself, regardless of public opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And so, you know, I think in terms of in this conversation, we've sort of covered quite a lot in terms about what is going on in the culture for people, how the crack epidemic has influenced those generations. I just wanted to ask you, in terms of like about yourself, in terms of how would you say masculinity and hip hop has shown up in your life?
Masculinity and hip hop has shown up in my life because at one time, again, as a kid, hip hop is what molded my view of masculinity. You know, what I consider to be masculine, were good or bad, right? So hip hop, again, was my point of reference. Not having a father in a home, hip hop was my point of reference of masculinity. Now, it caused me, I mean, I can't say it caused me. It's the music I was listening to, because hip hop is a very broad culture, you know, and some of it influenced me, again, to be like, I'm my brother's keeper, and it's about uplifting the people, which is how I'm living now. But some of it also influenced me as a man to be like, you know, it's all about me, disrespect everybody else at all costs for my own sake, you know, all of that type of stuff. So it molded a broad image of masculinity. And as I got older, I started to be intentional about picking apart what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to throw away. It's like eating the fish. You eat the fish, spit out the bones. You know what I'm saying? But masculinity was molded a lot by my perspective was by hip hop. And unfortunately, again, it started from hip hop to corporate hip hop. And once that corporate hip hop came in, a lot of it wasn't in my best interest. So a lot of my view of masculinity, I had to spit out.
Yeah. And I think it's important because I think you can get sort of loads of different messages about masculinity, and now kids are growing up with social media. I'm technically a Gen Zer, unfortunately, but I think for me, I'm trying to think of sort of what influenced my masculinity. I'm very fortunate that I've got my mum and my dad, and I think my dad did model a lot of what masculinity is for me. But that you go through stages where I mean, when I was listening to loads of Lil Wayne and Drake when he was a part of Young Money and all of that, and you never really think about maybe some of those messages which are coming through those and being like, oh, like if I listen back to that music now, I'll be like, yo, I was singing this on the bus, just calm, chill, like didn't really know what was being said, but like it sort of just gets into you, and I think you really have to be able to have, and I attended church a lot when I was younger as well, so I think I had a lot of alternative messages in terms of what masculinity was, and I'm still sort of figuring out my own masculinity now, and that also why I sort of started this podcast to like be able to talk to others, explore what that is, how it shows up for people, because I think one part of masculinity for me, which I'm getting better at, is like being vulnerable. Like I can sort of be vulnerable on my podcast to a certain extent, but sometimes if I need to tell someone something in person, it's really much harder to be vulnerable then. So yeah, it's different, isn't it? It shows up in different ways and in different forms too.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. So it's constant evolution. It's always a work in progress. And that's the thing about hip hop. It's constantly taking on new forms. The key is who's molding it. You know what I'm saying? Who's molding it into whose best interest is it serving? Is it just to, fatten people's pockets? Is it to really uplift the community and even fatten people in the community's pockets, But that's the key. Like, who is molding these cultural norms? That's something that I want to constantly put in the forefront of myself, first of all, and of the people I speak to. And let's follow that. And once we follow the source of these cultural norms, then we could decide if these cultural norms should be kept. So again, spit it out.
Definitely. So I've just got one final question for you, which I ask all my guests. And if there's a young Black boy that's listening to this conversation, how can something that help them with an understanding of themselves?
Well, the main thing is helping that young Black boy understand that he's great. Not he's meant to be rich. Not that he's meant to be famous, but he's great because he's uniquely him. And it's okay for him to really explore what his greatness looks like. What is it? You know what I'm saying? Again, somebody's greatness may be to change the world and do some kind of cosmic, have some kind of cosmic purpose where we hear about you for the next 100 years. Somebody else, you never hear about him, but he still was great. And it's okay to not be famous. It's okay to not be the toughest. Just follow who you are, find who you are, and be great. You know what I'm saying? Live above the hype and find out for yourself what your greatness looks like and be that.
Real. Thank you very much, K-Rahn. Where can people find you? Plug your stuff.
Well, I'm getting better on social media. So I'm on Instagram at Live Above It. If you go to Live Above It, you'll find me there. For those who want to do business with me, my website is innersunconsulting.com, innersunconsulting.com. And for the most part, that's it. That's me right there, right there. If you hit any one of those, I respond back. I'm a man of the people, so not hard to get in contact with. And, again, thanks for having me. I appreciate this conversation. Very thoughtful.
Bro, no, thank you for coming on. And I hope you have a good day.
You as well, my brother. Peace.
Peace.